Thank you for tuning in to our broadcast. Today at Trinity Tabernacle, we discuss escaping the slave mentality. For God did not deliver you out of Egypt to allow you to die in the wilderness. Stay tuned.
Thank you for joining Trinity Tabernacle, where we teach, preach, and live the gospel.
The whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The sons of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat, when we had bread to full, for you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." So today, with that text, let's talk about escaping the slave mentality. Escaping the slave mentality. I know that people think that the physical abuse that was perpetrated against millions of African Americans was the worst of the worst. But the truth of the matter is that every wound, every injury, every whip, every lash, every stroke of a horse whip potentially has the time to heal, because time heals all physical wounds. The real danger that was produced came from the mental abuse that was used on them. The torture of the mind had to comprehend with the idea that a very small man had the ability to control several large men with just the flick of a wrist because of the things that he had placed inside of their mind. So it's the mental abuse that has been so catastrophic for us as a people. It's the weapon that has destroyed our people, because the mental abuse needs a different direction to be able to be healed. Time for mental abuse only places the abuse in the back of the mind, but it never heals. It's never healed because it's been buried behind so many things that is placed on top of that, the things that we need to do to survive. So in order to heal from slave mentality, we have to get to a source that is able to heal the slave mind. We have to get to a place where we abandon what was done to us and focus on what's in front of us. The slave mind is an unstable mind because it is dependent on the slave master. God did not free you from Egypt for you to die in the wilderness. The slave mind says that you can only live if your earthly master feeds you, clothes you, houses you, protects you, and teaches you. The slave mind says that the only way that you can live and survive is by the hand of someone else. The slave mentality does not think that he or she, outside of being in the master's house, are capable of doing anything else but what the master dictates. Relationships can also demonstrate the same mindset, because we get used to being in a position that seems abusive, and we grow up in the next relationship seeking the same thing, because the slave mind has programmed us to tell us that this is what love looks like, and the only way that I have love if I'm abused, and if you don't abuse me, I'm not loved. And they get to this place when we're in the text, and they're finding themselves in between Elam and Sinai, still on their journey to the promised land of milk and honey that God had promised them, but they still have not been delivered from the slave mentality. They're still dependent upon the earthly master and have not yet decided to trust God completely. So they say, "Well, Moses, you brought us out of the place, even though we were being abused, even though we were being disrespected, even though we couldn't worship God freely. We had to ask permission to be able to go and make sacrifices for our God. Even though that they caused us to be in a panic, in a frenzy. You brought us out of that to die in the wilderness by ourselves. We were sitting at the master's table enjoying the master's food. We were eating his food, enjoying bread. We had things. We might not have had the things that we desired, but we had things. You brought all of us out of bondage to freedom, and for us to die in the wilderness." Stuck with the slave mentality, saying, I'd rather be abused. I'd rather take on the master's name. I'd rather eat when the master tells me to eat. I'd rather drink when the master tells me to drink, instead of being free depending on God. What a silly thing to say, a foolish statement. Because whenever we make our mind up that if God frees me, then nothing is impossible for me now. That whenever God opens up the door, the only thing that is impossible is for God not to do what he said he would do. Whenever God decides to liberate us, it's foolish for us to say, I'd rather go back to being a slave. I'd rather go back to being incarcerated. I'd rather go back to being confounded. I'd rather go back to somebody telling me when to walk, how to walk, when to talk, when to get up, when to go to sleep. I'd rather go back there, because now that I'm free, I'm not sure what to do with my freedom. And I'm complaining because yesterday I would have eaten at 2 o'clock. But because you brought me here in the wilderness, I'm not quite sure when I'm going to eat. And you're going to kill all of us. Giving ownership to Moses, not recognizing that this was by the hand of God. Because the Israelites, they saw all the miracles that had happened. They saw the plagues and the frogs and the lice and the sea turn into blood. They saw all of that, knowing that it was the hand of God. It had nothing to do with Moses. Moses just was the ambassador, the spokesman for God. But they're going to say, Moses, you and Aaron brought us all the way out here. I left my good bed behind. I left my good pillow behind. We had built us a nice little house, the 15 of us. But you brought us out here to die in the wilderness from hunger. Not thanking you for freeing us, for liberating us, from setting us free, for giving us our rights back. Not thank you that you stopped the whips from lashing on us 15 times because we're already elderly and we're moving slow. Not thank you from getting me out of the heat because they made me make brick without any straw. Not thank you because now I have my wife and my daughter in the same house again. Not thank you that I can go over and visit with a friend without having to worry about sneaking out and being hit by a horse or the lash because I'm not supposed to be out at a certain time. Not thank you, but you brought me out here to die from hunger. Oftentimes, when God brings us to a new beginning, because we're so used to what used to be, we complain to God almost as if saying, I wish you would have left me where I was. Instead of thinking about all of the new opportunities that can occur because now I've been liberated, I've been free, I've been set aside, I've been plucked up, I've been pulled out of the miry clay and my feet have been placed on a new ground. Not thinking about that, but I'm focused on where I came from. Because even if it didn't feel good to me, I've been used to it. What a foolish thing for us to do. But we have to keep our mind focused on God. We have to keep our praise focused on Jesus if we expect to escape the slave mentality. But God is a merciful God. For God could have said, well, since you are so inconsiderate, since you don't have any, consideration for all that I have done, I could just kill you right now because I'm God. Because I don't look at death the same way you do. Death is just your way to get back to me. So I can just kill you off right now and you don't have to worry about eating. But because he's an understanding God, because he is a patient, a merciful God, God sits and listens to the conversation that's going on amongst the Israelites. Not getting angry because really they're talking about what he did, not beating on his chest and making the mountains crumble and consuming them, but he takes his time to be God and he listens to all of the complaints that's going on with the Israelites' children. And he says, then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. Because of the relationship that God has with Moses, just like we talked about in Bible study, extended favor, because of the relationship that he had with Moses, God says, before you, I'm going to feed these Israelites, these ungrateful children, because of the relationship that I have with you, because everything that I declared that I would do for you, because of you, I'm going to feed them in spite of them complaining about me. And the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day. They didn't have to pay for it. They didn't have to sow in the field for it. They didn't have to barter for it. All they had to do was get up out of their bed, go over there, and pick up the morsels that God had laid down for them because of the relationship that God had with Moses. Wouldn't it be remarkable if because of the relationship that our mother had with God, that the things that we needed, that God says, because of you, I'm going to make sure that their college is paid for. Because of you, I'm going to make sure that their health is taken care of. Because of you, I'm going to make sure that they have a house when they get ready to have a family. Because of you. But we have to have our own relationship with Jesus if we expect for the things to occur that God said would occur for them. But God says, no, it's because of you. I'm going to do this because I love you. And because I understand that they may be a little foolish in the way that they approach me, even though that they have made sacrifices to me, their heart is still attached to the lashes, still attached to the abuse, still attached to the mental torture that went on, still attached to the visions that they saw, still attached to that. So in order for me to detach them, I have to give them what they need. Sometimes in life, the best way for us to really experience God is for God to give us what we need. When we think about Jesus' approach, whenever Jesus approached someone, he didn't immediately tell them, it might not have always told them that he was the Messiah. What he did was satisfy a need. The man was blind. He said, what do you want from me? He said, he could have told him, I am the master. You know that I'm capable of cleansing all of your sins. I'm capable of allowing you a seat in heaven. I'm capable of healing your blindness and every other disease in you. But he said, what do you want from me? So he learned that in order for us to understand who he is, he has to give us something that we need. Jesus gave him sight. And then after he opened up his physical eyes, his spiritual eyes became open. And the Bible said that he followed them. So he gave him exactly what he needed. God says that I'm going to give you what you need because you're complaining about hunger. But yet your real issue is that your mind is still connected to the sound of the whip. Your mind is still connected to the sound of the horses galloping up and down the streets. Your mind is still connected to the cries that you heard from the people being abused because they were not meeting their daily requirements. Your mind is still attached from that. So in order for me to change your mind, I've got to satisfy your hunger.